As someone with a channel focused mostly on Yu-Gi-Oh!, I often get asked what kind of cards I'd like to see in this game, what archetype I'd like to see get more support, what kind of cards I would create if given the opportunity. My answer to all three of these questions usually has something to do with Engraver of the Mark. Now, if you're unfamiliar with this card, I don't blame you. It's a weird little one-off tech card that came out way back in 2015. It's a level 4 dark spellcaster with 1800 attack, 1200 defense, and 2 unique effects. First, during either player's turn, when your opponent activates a card or effect by declaring exactly one card name, you can send this from your hand to the graveyard, declare one other card name, and the card name your opponent declared becomes the card name you declared. Second, while it's on the field, you can once per turn, during either player's turn, target one face-up card on the field and destroy it during the end phase of the next turn. Now, neither of these effects are what I would call good, but I always really liked the ideas behind them. There are already a ton of cards in the game that change their level, cards that change their attribute or their type, but very few that can change a declared card's name, which makes that first effect really interesting to me. The second effect is also kind of cool. It's like delayed removal, which is perfect for playing mind games, making your opponent think a few turns ahead. Plus in general, I just really like the idea of having a super strong effect, in this case, quick effect destruction without a cost, and then balancing it out by making it take 2 turns to actually resolve. It's an interesting dynamic that isn't explored a lot in Yu-Gi-Oh! So, to answer those questions from before, I'd like to see more effects like this, I'd like Engraver of the Mark to get its own archetype, and if I got to create my own cards, that's exactly what I would make. Now, normally I'm not the kind of guy who likes custom cards. In my opinion, games are an art, and if you're gonna spend your time creating art, you might as well make something original, something that you actually own all the rights to. Plus, a large majority of custom cards seemed pretty unbalanced, or they're just joke cards anyway. I'd imagine it's rare to get a really solid back-and-forth game, and even if I wanted to play something new, there's still tons of actual official Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards that I haven't played with yet. I'd prefer to go through those before I start looking at crazy custom archetypes. That being said, Dueling Book's new custom card feature has made creating and playing custom archetypes really easy, and it's currently around Christmas time, so I figured what the heck, I'll try something new and goofy, and see if you guys like it. And so I present to you the Mark archetype. It consists of the original Engraver of the Mark, plus 7 new monsters and 7 new spell traps that fit along with its theme. Art-wise, the original Engraver was loosely based on Zoro, what with a big red Z in the background, so I ran with that theme. All the monsters I made are based off supporting cast from the Zoro stories, or just alternate versions of Zoro. Creator of the Mark is supposed to be his secret identity, Enforcer is just a more intimidating-looking version of him, Lover is his love interest, Overseer is his wealthy father, Protector is the friar that knows and keeps his secret, and Servant is his faithful blind servant. The actual pictures I used are mostly taken from cartoon adaptations of Zoro, which I just cut out, added shadows to, and placed on the Z background. The one exception is Protector, because I couldn't really find a good picture of the friar, so I just used a stock photo of a Gregorian monk. As for the spell traps, most of them are based off things that the Mark represents, like the Mark of Determination, the Mark of Justice, Zeal, Patience, Hope, which I just represented with different colored versions of the Z. There's also Daring Escape of the Marked Ones, which is supposed to be Engraver swinging on a chandelier, and the field spell Village of the Marked Ones, which is a painting of an old Spanish town that I just made darker and added a moon to. Finally, there's the one extra deck monster, a Link 3, called True Essence of the Mark, which is the coolest picture I could find of Zoro put in front of a moon. I am well aware that most of this art sucks, but I'm not about to spend weeks drawing original art for a goofy custom archetype, so this is what you get. If there's anyone out there that wants to make better replacement art, feel free to do so. I will gladly replace any of these if someone sends me a better version. But enough about the art and the themes and stuff, let's get to the real meat of the custom cards, which is their effects. In general, this deck's playstyle is one of disruption and stalling. A lot of the effects are really slow, so the archetype tries to account for that by slowing your opponent down and giving you more time. If you can stall long enough to get out their boss monster, it serves as their win condition. For the monsters, I tried to follow Engraver in a lot of ways. Most monsters have two effects like he does, a hand trap discard effect that has to do with monster names, and a on-field quick effect that is really powerful, but has a delay to it. I also tried to make a lot of these effects generic enough that you could use these monsters as like one-off tech cards in other decks, while also making them consistent enough that they can be played together. Starting off, we have Creator of the Mark, a level 2 dark spellcaster/tuner with 200 attack, 200 defense, and 3 effects. First, it cannot be destroyed by battle. Second, you can send this card from your hand to the graveyard, target one monster your opponent controls, and declare a card name. The target's name is treated as the declared name until the end of the turn. Third is a hard once per turn that says, if this card is sent to the graveyard, you can special summon it during the end phase of the next turn. The second effect is a neat little tech that can be used generically to counter certain decks. Like if a card specifically needs an elemental hero on the field, you can use this to change its name to Dark Magician and really screw up your opponent's plays. Mostly though, it's just designed so that you can always activate it. Even if it won't give you any benefit, you can always discard this as long as your opponent has a monster, and then next turn you'll get a defense wall that can't be destroyed by battle. I made it a tuner despite there being no of the mark synchros, just to give it a little bit more tech usage outside of the archetype. And its last effect is a hard once per turn, because of the boss monster, who I'll explain later. Moving on, Enforcer of the Mark is a level 5 Wind Warrior with 2400 attack, 1600 defense, and 2 effects. First, you can send this card from your hand to the graveyard, declare one card name, and monsters with the declared name cannot attack this turn. Second, once per turn, quick effect, target up to 2 cards your opponent controls, return them to the hand during the end phase of the next turn. This is meant to be sort of a secondary boss monster for the archetype with its higher attack, and its effect that I think could actually be difficult to deal with mid to late game. Like, between activating it on your turn and your opponent's turn, you could target up to 4 cards, and if your opponent is low on resources, they might not be able to get rid of all those cards before they get sent back to the hand. Because it's pretty powerful, I made it a level 5, and I didn't give it away to special summon itself, but it's never a brick because in the worst case scenario, you can always just discard it to prevent an attack. And if you happen to have Creator of the Mark in your hand, you can actually prevent 2 attacks, because you can change one of your opponent's monsters to have the same name as another monster they control, and then when Enforcer declares that name, neither of them will be able to attack that turn. I already went over Engraver, he's the basic monster, so I won't mention him again. Lover of the Mark is a level 4 fire spellcaster with 500 attack, 2100 defense, and the following effects. If your opponent controls a card whose current name is different from its original name, you can special summon this card from your hand. Once per turn, quick effect, target one The Mark monster in your graveyard, special summon it during the end phase of your next turn. This is one of the few monsters that pretty much just purely supports the Mark archetype. It gives up its hand trap effect in exchange for some special summoning that can help you get the boss monster out. To make up for its lack of generic use, I gave it one of the stronger quick effects that let you continually resummon things, and a pretty high defense total, at least for a level 4 monster. Overseer of the Mark is a level 3 dark spellcaster with 1200 attack, 800 defense, and if either player activates a card or effect that declares exactly one card name, you can special summon it from your hand or graveyard, and if you do, you take no battle damage this turn. While it's on the field, it has the quick effect that says once per turn you could target up to 2 face-down cards, banish them during the end phase of the next turn. While this does have some generic use, it's probably the weakest of the monsters, with its second effect being nearly useless unless you're going up against counter fairies, or you're playing anti-spell fragrance or something. But its first effect offers some swarming and stalling that the archetype really needs to get to its win condition. Conversely, we have Protector of the Mark, which is probably one of the most generically useful cards in here. It's a light level 4 spellcaster with 1900 attack, 1100 defense, and just one effect. Once per turn, as a quick effect, you can either target a card in either player's graveyard and banish it during the end phase of the next turn, or you can target a banished card and return it to the graveyard during the end phase of the next turn. It's obviously too slow to be used as anything but a tech card, but the fact that you can use it during either player's turn and just keep banishing or recycling cards makes it seem like it might be a decent one of either used in zombies or perhaps even against zombies. And if nothing else, it's a 1900 beatstick. Our final main deck monster is Servant of the Mark, which is a level 3 Earth Warrior with 1500 attack, 1000 defense, and it goes back to the same dual effect pattern that most of the monsters have. Its hand trap effect allows you to target one face-up spell trap your opponent controls and change its name until the end of the turn, while its on-field effect lets you banish a The Mark spell trap from your deck and then add it to your hand during the end phase of the next turn. Like the original Engraver, this guy's hand trap effect is pretty useless right now. The only application I can think of for it is to use it to troll Fire Fist, but it could possibly get better in the future if we ever get an archetype that interacts with spell traps of a specific name. I made up for the lame hand trap effect by making it search all the spell traps, albeit in the same slow way that everything else in the deck does. The only monster left then is the single extra deck monster, True Essence of the Mark, which is a Link 3 that can be made with any 3 The Mark monsters. It is a light, psychic type monster with 2900 attack, 3 downwards facing arrows, and a simple but powerful effect. The Mark monster effects that would resolve during the end phase of the next turn, resolve immediately instead. This guy is your win condition. Get True Essence of the Mark out, and all of the Mark monsters become absolutely broken, since they can just bounce, destroy, banish, summon from the graveyard, search your deck, as costless quick effects. This card is why Creator's effect to summon itself had to be a hard once per turn, because otherwise you could just loop it infinitely and use something like Cannon Soldier, and I don't think anyone wants that. Of course, to get to that point, you essentially have to have 4 of the Mark monsters on the field at once, which can be pretty difficult given how slow they are and how little they special summon. It's hard to say without actually playing the archetype and seeing what other people might tech in with these, but I feel like I could maybe stand to make this a little more powerful, maybe give it immunity to targeting or something, but I like to err on the side of caution. I'd rather create an interesting, weak archetype than a broken one. Anyway, that's all the monsters. We still have 7 spell traps to go over, but fortunately those are much simpler to explain. To start with, the Mark of Determination. This is a continuous spell that says once per turn you can target one The Mark card in your graveyard and add it to your hand during the end phase of the next turn. If this card is destroyed by an opponent's card effect, your opponent must declare one card name and send all copies of the declared card from their hand and field to the graveyard. The first effect is just some recycling, pretty simple, while the second effect is just a bonus if your opponent decides to get rid of this. Since it forces the opponent to reveal their entire hand, I made sure that the opponent has to destroy it themselves. You can't destroy it. As for its actual effectiveness, that really depends on what you have when the effect triggers. It actually combos really well with the original Engraver of the Mark, since you can use him to change what card your opponent calls, making them discard key cards from their hand, or send cards from their field to the graveyard. You can also use this with Creator or Servant to change face-up cards on the field to whatever name your opponent says. It's one of those combos that I feel would be really epic if you happen to get it off, but it's more than likely never going to happen in an actual duel. I mean, if this was even a real archetype. Next up we have the Mark of Justice, which is a normal spell that says banish one The Mark monster from your deck. During the end phase of the next turn, take that card and either add it to your hand or send it to the graveyard. Then, if this card is still in your graveyard, add it to your hand. I feel like this encapsulates the entire theme of the deck best. Not only is it both a Rhoda and a Foolish for the Mark monsters, but it recycles itself every time you use it. It would be absolutely broken if not for the wait time, and the fact that it only searches the Mark monsters. Also, I feel I should clarify real quick, the Link Monsters effect only applies to the other monsters, not to the spell traps. So this thing does not become an infinite searcher while it's out, don't worry. Moving on to the Mark of Zeal. This is a quick play spell that says target 1 mark monster. It gains 700 attack and can attack thrice this turn. If this card is sent to the graveyard during the end phase of the next turn, all monsters you control gain 500 attack and defense, and all monsters your opponent controls lose 500 attack and defense. Not much to say about this one. It's attack manipulation. It might be worth it for the Mark decks to Foolish Burial Goods it, but probably not. Also, I like the attacking thrice thing because it's like the 3 sword slashes you use to make the Z. Just a little bit of art with effect interaction. I like stuff like that. Going down, we have the normal trap, the Mark of Patience, which says, if you control no cards, you can activate this from your hand. If a card is added to your opponent's hand, except by drawing them, shuffle all cards with those names from your opponent's field and or graveyard into the deck during the end phase of the next turn. Again, a nice kind of generic effect that stops searching in a way I've never seen before. It doesn't prevent your opponent from searching the cards or get rid of them immediately, but if that card they search is still on the field or in the graveyard during the end of your turn, it goes back into the deck. Good to use against pretty much anything that you can search with terraforming. The last of the Z spell traps is the Mark of Hope, which is a continuous trap that says if you take damage, gain life points equal to twice the damage taken during the end phase of the next turn. You can banish this card from your graveyard to target 1 the Mark monster you control, and until the end phase of the next turn, it cannot be destroyed by battle or card effects, and you take no damage from battles involving it. This is essentially Stalling, the movie The Game. It's probably the most generically useful spell trap in here. I could see maybe a Romages running something like this. Could be used to counter Trickstars. I'd imagine this being one of those cards that stall decks play at 3, and unless you have a whole bunch of spell trap removal, it gets really annoying really fast. Our last remaining spell traps are Daring Escape to the Marked Ones and Village of the Marked Ones. Daring Escape is a counter trap that says when your opponent's monster declares an attack, banish 1 the Mark card from your graveyard, and if you do, it becomes the end phase. I can't decide if this is useless because it's a battle trap that doesn't actually gain you any advantage, or if it's a bit too powerful because it skips half of your opponent's turn. Hard to say, that's why I locked it into the archetype by requiring the Mark in the graveyard. That just leaves us with the field spell, which is perhaps the most complicated card on the list. It has 3 effects. First, if the Mark cards you control would be destroyed by battle or card effect, it is not destroyed. During the next end phase of a turn that a Mark card would have been destroyed, send it to the graveyard. So basically, if your opponent destroys your cards, they actually stay there until the end phase of the next turn, making your opponent's effects act like the Mark effects. Second, your opponent cannot target more than 1 card at a time. This is perhaps the only generic application of the field spell, since it's anti-Twin Twisters, but mostly it's just there so the third effect isn't as complicated. It says if your opponent would target a card with an effect, they must declare the name of the card they intend to target. This makes a lot of your monster effects significantly more useful. Engraver, for instance, can be used to choose the target of any effect that would target a monster, while Servant can redirect spell trap destruction to any other face-up spell traps. Overall, just does what a field spell does by bringing the rest of the archetype together. And with that, we have the Mark archetype. And wow, this took a lot longer to explain than I expected. I did not plan for this to be a very long or detailed video, but I figured I put in all the work designing the cards, I might as well explain every detail that went into it, because I'm probably not going to talk about them again. Now let me know down in the comments what you thought of this little excursion into custom cards. I'm not really interested in looking at other people's custom cards, and I don't have any intention of making any more of my own custom cards. But you never know, if this video ends up getting a ton of support, maybe I'll do more stuff with it. Probably not, but there's always a chance. Either way, for now, I'm done with this. Thanks for listening, I hope you enjoyed. And until next time, good luck, and have fun.